We're continuing our Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Hilchot Shabbat, and we're up to Siman Resh Pei Dalet, and Daf Samech Bed Amud Aleph of regular prints of your Mishna Beruras. And these are the halachot of Haftarah on Shabbat morning after Kriyat Torah, and the brachot of Haftarah. Now Shulchan Aruch starts, and this is straight from the Tosafot and Rosh in Perek HaKoreh at Megillah. This is not, even though this Hilchot Shabbat is, the halachot of Haftarah are mainly mentioned in Masechet Megillah, in Daf Chav Gimel. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Maftirim ben Navi me'inyana shel parasha. We read from the Navi a topic that is similar to the inyan of parasha, ve'en pochatin me-21 psukim, and you have to have a minimum of 21 psukim. Why 21 psukim, by the way? Because we have 7 aliyot, and 7 aliyot, minimum of every aliyah is 3 psukim, times 3 is 21. Now, why does it have to be mimicking the Kriyat Torah? Because this was, at some point, all that they did. The institution of Haftarah was because there were times under the Roman government that we were prohibited from Kriyat Torah. They didn't want public Kriyat Torah, and therefore Chazal said, in order for people not to forget, we will find pieces of Navi that talks about the main core element of that parasha that would have been read in the tzibur, and we read this instead. And therefore, they instituted also that you'll have 7 times 3, because you need 3 psukim per aliyah, and you need minimum of 7 aliyot on Shabbat, and therefore you'll get to this number of 21 psukim minimum for the Haftarah, which the Mishna Berura writes right away, without even missing a beat. Says, if this has to be a Sefer Haftarah, a surprise, everyone is reading it from a book. I don't find communities having a scroll of Haftarah that's written on a kosher cloth the way a Sefer should be written. He says, because it should come out that the person should not be yotzeh. You won't fulfill your obligation with a printed Sefer. It has to be like a regular Sefer Torah that's written on cloth with kosher dio and all the halachot of Sfarim. It should be following the halachot of Sefer Torah, at least the Megillah. And the Taz and Magen Avraham, they try to answer for the custom that we have, both Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, generally speaking, don't have a scroll of Haftarot, and they hold, the Taz and Magen Avraham, that even though that it is printed, and even if it's on a niyar, on a regular paper, the way we have it, and not on a cloth rolled as a sefer, still is mutar, and it's fine. Now, Magen Avraham says that you at least have to read Haftarah from a full sefer of Nevi'im, right? Not just print out the piece that you're reading, but you should have a full Nach at least. You find many shuls that they have a full Tanakh, a large one, that a person that does the Navi, the Haftarah, reads from that. That says the Magen Avraham, you should definitely have that, and not from a Haftarah in the Chumash. This, of course, would say that the person gets maftir, should not be reading from a Chumash or even from those fancy Sfardi Haftarah Sfarim that looks like a miniature Sefer Torah, but only has printed the pieces of Haftarah that you read that week. It's not a full Nach. That would be very b'diavad, according to Magen Avraham, right? The Lechatchila would be to have a large Tanakh from which you read the Haftarot. Only Rabbi holds like that, as well. And Chacham Ovadia says it also. Says a person should have a full Tanakh. If you only have the printed haftarot in the Chumash, then you could be mekel, you could rely to be lenient, not to be mebatel the haftara. But לכתחילה בוודאי ראוי ונכון שיהיה לכל סיפור נביאים שנכתבים בקלף כדין. Says the Chafetz Chaim, לכתחילה every sibur should have a sefer nevi'im that's written on klaf, like a din of sefer Torah, שאז גם השמות הנכתבים בקדושה, and the names of Hashem are written with kedusha, with the proper sofer, mashenken kshu al niyar. But if it's printed on a paper, then it's not considered that the names are written. This was a big chumrah that's known as something that the Gra pushed in his community, to have a proper Sefer Nevi'im written on klaf. Now this has spread ever since to other communities as well, mainly the Ashkenazi communities. There are some of the Moroccan communities within the Sfaradim who have pushed this as well, but nevertheless, the general minhag of the Sfaradim has been to rely to read it from Enach, but as we mentioned before, much better to skip the Sefer Haftarot that they have and have an actual Tanakh that's full Nevi'im, full Sefer Nevi'im over there, and to read it from there. So says it's good for Gabaim to be present. Yes, that's correct. To have that again. This is in our community that we had also this one of the large Tanachs that you have designated for reading Haftarah. Obviously, it makes it easier to have those ready Haftarot that they also help out, especially when the Ashkenazim and Sfaradim have different haftarahs, or different Sfaradim have different the pieces of Navi that their minhag is to read. So those Sifrei Haftarah, they have everything with guidelines and with a mafteach and so on. So it helps, but nevertheless, halachically would be better to do it from a full Sefer Navi. So says the Mishna Berura, why is it that we do Haftarah? Because, says the Chafetz Chaim in Ot Bet, this was an actual historic fact that they banned reading the Torah in the tzibur and learning Torah in private, but the gezerah was only against Torah shebichtav of the actual chumash, and therefore the workaround was to read from Nevi'im 7 different aliyot. They literally mimicked the structure of 7 aliyot, but just they did it in Navi instead of doing it in Chumash, and they even would say bracha on them. They would say even bracha on them, and therefore we, after the Gezerah Baruch Hashem was nullified, we still kept this as well. Now, this is actually very timely, because in Sefer HaTishbi, it writes that Antiochos, that was the king of Yavan, which is next week is Chanukah, so it ends up being very, very timely to read this. He's the one that made this gezerah. La'avira mechuker ratzonecha, they made a gezerah against the Torah, right? We say this in our Halisim, right? That they stopped us from learning Torah, and Sefer HaTishbi says this is actually that gezerah, that he couldn't read the Torah in public, and we call this haftarah. The Radha writes in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, the early Rishonim, that because the Torah is opened, and from the moment that you open the Sefer Torah, it's asur to speak. This is something people in our community, Baruch Hashem, are extremely very careful, and it's not accepted to speak in the time of the Kriyat Torah at all. And that's really a halacha. Once you open the Sefer Torah, people cannot speak. It's considered a shot Kriyat Torah. Even learning Torah, speaking in learning, it will be a problem. And after you read the Sefer Torah, after you're finished with the Torah, it's mutar to speak in divrei halacha in the Bet Knesset. And haftara means yaftiru besafa, that you're speaking. It comes from the language of speech. So haftara means after this you could now talk. Talking in obviously not divrei chol in the shul, that would be anyways a problem. Talking and learning, well, even that in the time of the Kriyat Torah would be a problem. So it says the Mishna Berura in Ot Gimel over here. Aval b'lav hachi, this is really going back on the Ramah, which we have not read yet. Just notice that we finished the first sentence of the Shulchan Aruch over here, but the Shulchan Aruch continues. Ela im ken salka inyana bebatzir miachi. If you have a haftarah that the paragraph, the inyan finishes before 21 psukim, you have to start and end a whole new topic. You could just suffice with a smaller paragraph that finishes that topic that you started, which is the inyan of the parasha, like the olotechem sefu al zivchechem, the topic that he gives as an example, that it finishes way before 21 psukim, and it still will be a kasher haftara. Says the Ramah, v'davka b'Shabbat b'inyan 21 psukim, it's only on haftara of Shabbat, because again, psukim of the Kriyat Torah of Shabbat needs to be at least 21, because you have 7 aliyot, and the minimum of every aliyah is 3. But on days that you don't have to have 7 aliyot, there will be fine. Says the Ramah, aval b'yom tov shkorin chamisha, yom tov will be 5 aliyot, so 5 times 3 will be 15 minimum instead of 21. Sagi b'chamisha asar psukim, it will be sufficient to do 15 psukim, not needing 21. Velo nitkena haftara rak b'tzibur achar shkaru b'Torah, and the haftara is only instituted b'tzibur. So if you don't have a tzibur, then you don't have the chiyuv of haftara. Aval b'lav hachi asur likrot im habrachot shelefanea v'la'achareha. You can't say the brachot of haftara if you don't have a tzibur. Says the Ramah, but you could do it aval b'lo bracha shari. Without bracha, you could of course read. Now that says the no, without bracha you could do whatever you want. You could read it from the regular chumash as well. Indeed, if you're not having a klaf, if you don't have a haftarah that's written properly on a kosher sefer, then the tzibur perhaps is not yotze with the kriyat haftarah of the shaliach tzibur. That would be very, very debatable, and hence every yachid v'yachid in the tzibur should be reading their own kriyat haftarah from their chumash. So it turns out very interesting that the sefer Torah that they're reading is chovat tzibur perhaps, and you don't have to read it yourself. Even if it's chovat yachid, just listening to it will be sufficient, because it's read from a kosher sefer Torah. But a haftarah that's not read from a kosher sefer haftarot, you would have to read the portion of every week on your own. So that's another reason not to waste the time of haftarah and let it up to the shaliach tzibur to read, but rather reading the entirety of the haftarah of the week, every yachid v'yachid in the shul on their own. Says the
I was saying though, if you don't have a tzibur and your haftarah is on a klaf, can you read it from the klaf without the brachas?
not with the brachas.
Or without, but you could.
You could from without, yeah. There's no issue of taking it out of the. It's not like the Sefer Torah. We had this earlier on in Kuf Mem Gimal. That even that according to Primi Gadim you could take out the Sefer Torah for need, but here you don't have those prohibitions, those limitations at all. So you could definitely take it out and read it. So says the Mishna Berura in Ot Gimal, Aval b'lav hachi kigon shlo haya lahem Sefer Torah likrot. If you don't have a Sefer Torah, right? So you are stuck somewhere with a tzibur, and you thought, Reuben thought that Shimon is bringing Sefer Torah, Shimon thought Reuben is bringing, so they got stuck Shabbat without Sefer Torah. So what do? You can read the Haftarah. Ve'im karu beSefer Torah ve'nimtzet achar kriya shehi psula. Same would be a question, at least, if you have a Sefer Torah and you read from Sefer Torah, and then it turned out at the end, in Mashlim, you realize that the Sefer Torah is pasul. Right? Also a question. But there, once you already read from the Torah, you could do Haftarah with bracha as well. That is fine. But if you didn't have any Kriyat Torah, then it will be a problem. But if you are stuck in a situation that there's no eruv, your Sefer Haftarot or a Chumash is in houses away from the shul. At the shul you don't have a Sefer Haftarot, then says the Mishna Berura, Holchin 10 people go from the tzibur to the house that you have the Sefer Haftarot or the Chumash with the Haftarah, and you say the Haftarot over there, and you even say the bracha of Haftarah, even though it's not in the same place as where you read the Torah. They read the Torah, and 10 people, which is considered a minimum of a tzibur, from the tzibur went there, and then they could continue in the second makom as well, which basically ends our Seif Aleph over here in Siman Pedalet, and Be'ezrat Hashem, some of the details of this and the continuation of Seif Bet we will continue to discuss in the days to come. Hazaku Baruch.